Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. It's episode 4 of our deep dive into the Zindi Lelapa AI Buzuzu-Mavi challenge. Now, have you ever wondered how much performance you're really leaving on the table when you use super efficient fine-tuning methods like QLoRA? We know they save memory, but what's the trade-off? And more importantly, how do we squeeze every last drop of performance out of these smaller models, especially when competition rules push us towards them? Stick around, because today we're tackling exactly that. So, in the first few videos, we got our feet wet with this amazing challenge, tackling sentiment analysis, machine translation, and XNLI across Hausa and Swahili. We looked at QLoRA for efficient fine-tuning on a small model, figured out how to balance the loss across those 3 different tasks, and even explored zero-shot inference using the pretty powerful Gemma 4B model. But here's the kicker: the organizers are smart. They actually penalize using these huge models for the final prizes. The goal is accessibility and deployability, which makes total sense for regions maybe without massive GPU clusters. That Gemma 4B model? Yeah, that's 4 billion parameters. To actually compete effectively and qualify, we need to get that knowledge distilled down into the official challenge model, InkubaLM, which is tiny in comparison at just 0.4 billion parameters. That's 10 times smaller. Distillation is the end goal, but first, we need the best possible small model to distill from. And that often means pushing beyond QLoRA. So today, we're focusing on standard fine-tuning InkubaLM to really max out its potential score, creating a strong foundation before we even think about distillation in the next episode. All right, let's bring up our first slide. On the left here, you see a conceptual look at the InkubaLM architecture. It's a pretty standard decoder-only transformer, much like GPT-style models, just scaled down to about 400 million parameters. You've got your embeddings, multiple decoder layers with self-attention and MLPs, normalization, the usual suspects. But the really interesting part is on the right. This compares the leaderboard scores. Look at this. InkubaLM fine-tuned with QLoRA gets a score of 0.285. Not bad, right? Especially considering the memory savings we talked about in episode 2. But when we do standard fine-tuning on the exact same 0.4B InkubaLM model, look at that jump, 0.351. That's a significant improvement just by training all the weights. Now here's the reality check. Look at the green bar. That's Gemma 4B, the much larger model, doing zero-shot inference, no fine-tuning at all, and it still beats our fine-tuned small model with a score of 0.387. What does this tell us? Well, first, standard fine-tuning can unlock more performance from a specific model compared to QLoRA because you're letting the entire network adapt. But second, scale is still king. A model that's 10 times larger often just knows more from its pre-training and can generalize better right out of the box, even beating a smaller model specifically tuned for the task. This brings us nicely to our next slide, directly comparing these two approaches. We just saw standard fine-tuning gave InkubaLM a better score, so why did we even start with QLoRA back in episode 2? Well, let's look at the pros and cons. QLoRA, as we discussed, is all about memory efficiency. Freezing the base model in 4-bit and only training tiny adapters. That lets you tune huge models on hardware like a single consumer GPU, maybe 16 gigabytes or 24 gigabytes. Training is faster, checkpoints are tiny. It democratizes fine-tuning, which is awesome. The main drawback, as we saw, you might not hit that absolute peak performance because you're not tuning everything. Now, standard fine-tuning. The big pro, maximum potential performance. You update every single weight, letting the model fully adapt. It's conceptually simpler in some ways, no extra LoRa ranks or alphas to worry about. But the cons? Oh boy, the cons. Look at that memory usage, it's huge. You need way more VRAM because you're tracking gradients and optimizer states for hundreds of millions or billions of parameters. Training is slower, checkpoints are massive. And for the really big models, it's often just not feasible without a serious cluster. So, for InkubaLM, standard fine-tuning gave us that score boost because adapting all 400 million parameters was more effective than just tuning the small QLoRA adapters for this specific set of tasks. Okay, so standard fine-tuning gives better results for InkubaLM, but I mentioned the crazy memory cost. Let's break that down with this last slide. When I first tried standard fine-tuning InkubaLM with the settings we used, my GPU memory usage shot up. I actually observed around 17 gigabytes. Look at this breakdown. The model weights themselves, in BF16, aren't that big, maybe 1.6 gigabytes. The gradients take up another 1.6 gigabytes. But the killer? Optimizer states. If you use the standard Atom W optimizer, it stores momentum and variance for every single parameter, usually in full 32-bit precision. For our 400 million parameter model, that translates to roughly 6.4 gigabytes just for the optimizer. Add an activation memory, even with gradient checkpointing helping out, and all the framework overhead from PyTorch and CUDA, and suddenly 17 gigabytes makes sense. Now, how did I manage this on a Kaggle T4 GPU, which only has 16 gigabytes of VRAM? This is where the practical tip comes in, thanks to some great advice. Instead of the default Atom W, I switched to 8-bit Atom. Look at the difference. Using 8-bit quantized states for the optimizer drops that 6.4 gigabytes requirement down to around 1.7 gigabytes. That massive saving was the key to making standard fine-tuning feasible on the Kaggle notebook without running out of memory. You can find the link of the notebook in the description below. It's a lifesaver when you're resource-constrained but still want to push performance beyond basic QLoRA. So, what's the takeaway from today? Standard fine-tuning definitely squeezed more performance out of our 0.4B InkubaLM compared to QLoRA, giving us a stronger baseline. But we saw that raw scale still matters, with the larger Gemma model performing better even zero-shot. The big challenge with standard fine-tuning is memory, but using tricks like 8-bit Atom can make it possible even on accessible hardware like a Kaggle T4. This sets us up perfectly for the next episode, where we'll finally tackle knowledge distillation, trying to transfer the capabilities of that strong, zero-shot Gemma model into our best-performing, standard fine-tuned InkubaLM model. That's the path to potentially getting the best of both worlds and acing this Zindi challenge. I hope this walkthrough was helpful. If you learned something or found this interesting, definitely hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And leave a comment below. Are you using standard fine-tuning, QLoRA, or something else in your projects? I'd love to hear about it. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss the next episode on distillation. Thanks so much for watching, keep learning, keep experimenting, and I'll see you in the next video.